Assalamu alaikum everybody. Thank you for coming. Inshallah, we're going to start in 2 minutes. So if you'd like to make tea, make yourself comfortable. Actually, I don't see the tea, but we can sort that out before we start, inshallah. There is tea bags. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We're just going to start off with some Quran by Murtaza Mamdani, and then we'll continue the program, inshallah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الذين آتيناهم الكتاب يعرفونه كما يعرفون أبناءهم وإن فريقا منهم ليكتمون الحق وهم يعلمون. الحق من ربك فلا تكونن من الممترين. ولكل وجهة هو موليها فاستبقوا الخيرات أينما تكونوا يأت بكم الله جميعا إن الله على كل شيء قدير. ومن حيث خرجت فول وجهك شطر المسجد الحرام وإنه للحق من ربك وما الله بغافل عما تعملون. ومن حيث خرجت فول وجهك شطر المسجد الحرام وحيث ما كنتم فولوا وجوهكم شطره لئلا يكون للناس عليكم حجة إلا الذين ظلموا منهم فلا تخشوهم واخشوني ولأتم نعمتي عليكم ولعلكم تهتدون. كما أرسلنا فيكم رسولا منكم يتلو عليكم آياتنا ويزكيكم ويعلمكم الكتاب والحكمة ويعلمكم ما لم تكونوا تعلمون. فاذكروني أذكركم واشكروا لي ولا تكفرون يا أيها الذين آمنوا استعينوا بالصبر والصلاة إن الله مع الصابرين ولا تقولوا لمن يقتل في سبيل الله أموات بل أحياء ولكن لا تشعرون ولنبلونكم بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم ورحمة وأولئك هم المهتدون صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Hassan Murtaza. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. I seek refuge from Satan, our open enemy. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most kind, the most merciful. Assalamu alaikum, my brothers and sisters, on this Friday evening. Thank you for joining us at this first that Hujjat has done in terms of energy seminars. Energy, like everything else, like all the blessings Allah has given us, we took for granted until now. But in reality, it forms such a big part of our lives. The phones, the computers you see, the heating, the lighting. And this winter in particular, after COVID, everything seems to be going up in price. And energy is directly impacting all of us, especially our wallets. My name is Ali Abbas Hashim. I'll be your host for this evening. I'm a GP by profession. All I know about energy is that tea and coffee will keep you warm and will help you stay awake. So I'm very honored to welcome our guest speaker, Brother Ayman Taki. Just to give you a brief introduction, he graduated at Brunel College, or Brunel University rather, and since then he graduated in electrical and electronic engineering, and then he specialized in renewable energy systems. 2 years working as an electrical engineer for Network Rail, and then another 3 years at Network Rail leading the Southern Region's decarbonization program. Now, if like me, you didn't understand any of that, we're hoping he'll explain a bit more. But he was highly commended in the 2019 Junior Energy Management Awards by the EMA. And he's currently been 10 months at GPE as an energy manager. So I'm sure you will agree with me that that's quite an impressive resume for 4 years out of university. So well done. Just a few house rules. We're going to go through a presentation, and then inshallah we'll take Q&A at the end. We do have a Slido running, so you can see that behind me on the screen. So if you go to slido.com, if you put in that number, which is 367-6480, and if you post your question, either with your name or anonymously, and then inshallah we'll pick up those questions at the end as well. That will ensure that anything that needed to be answered during the presentation gets picked up at the end as well. All right. So without any further ado, I'll ask Brother Ayman to take the floor. Please welcome the Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you very much for that introduction. Thank you very much for your time and taking time this evening to sort of attend and effectively listen through me, hopefully talking for not much longer than half an hour. Next slide, please. So what I'm hoping to do this evening is just to go through a couple of easy steps, a couple of steps that aren't particularly expensive or difficult to implement within your household, just to help reduce your energy costs as much as possible this winter. Next slide, please. But first, we need to go through a disclaimer. Electricity and gas prices today are around 180% higher than they were 24 months ago, around 180% higher than 2 years ago, and therefore, realistically speaking, no matter sort of how much we're able to do, unless we're able to reduce our energy consumption by something like 90-odd%, which is not doable, we are looking at higher bills at some point this winter and potentially next summer, and depending on how the situation goes, winter next year as well. But I'm hoping whatever is discussed today can at least help you guys and help us as much as possible to minimize that increase. So next step, next slide even, please. So very quickly, as was very quickly gone through, I graduated in electrical and electronic engineering from Brunel in 2016. Specialized in sort of renewable energy systems, so anything from PV panels to wind, offshore wind farms, to sort of geothermal systems. Sort of that was my bread and butter. I then joined Network Rail as a graduate electrical engineer. It took me a grand total of 2 weeks, I think, to figure out that engineering wasn't the one for me. And so within around sort of 18 months, I managed to land a role as an energy manager. Now, I've got to be honest, I walked into my first day as an energy manager not actually knowing what an energy manager does. And I wouldn't be surprised sort of if you guys haven't heard of an energy manager either. In essence, an energy manager manages energy. Surprise, surprise. And so it was my job in the early days to look at ways look at areas where we at Network Rail were wasting energy, and finding ways or implementing projects and programs to minimize that wastage. Within sort of a couple of years of doing that, I ended up sort of creating and building the decarbonization team across the southern region. So myself and the team covered a region all the way from Dover through to Portsmouth, and including London south of the River Thames. So we're talking quite a sort of significant geographical area. And we were managing the energy for that whole geographical area whilst also implementing or creating a strategy and implementing a strategy to achieve net zero carbon by 2040. And so really my specialism, more than anything over the last 3 or 4 years, has been sort of creating and implementing net zero carbon strategies for big businesses. Having said that, a lot of sort of the work there sort of intertwines pretty nicely with sort of energy management and how to reduce sort of energy wastage across your homes or across your offices. And over the last 10 months, I've been sort of the energy lead, if you like, at GPE, which is sort of a property management company that works in central London. And I now sort of manage a portfolio of 45 commercial buildings. Next slide, please. And so what I'm hoping to go through today is very quickly how we got here. Why is energy so expensive today compared to last year and the year before? What is the energy price cap? What does it mean? How much is it? And then I'll go through a couple of sort of energy reduction facts or fiction questions, and that's where I'm hoping that you guys are able just to jump in with whether you think it's a fact or it's a fiction. And then we'll sort of move on to the sort of what can you do at home to start to understand your energy consumption and then to find ways to minimize it or maximize your efficiency as much as possible. So next slide, please. So how we got here, next slide again. So what this is a 15, 16 year, actually from 2004, so we're talking 17, 18 years, is an 18-year outlook as to the price of electricity and gas. So the green line is your price of electricity, your blue line is the price of gas. And the only reason I've put this here is just to show how little the prices have changed over those sort of 16, 17 years. There's been very little volatility, minus this area here, or this time period around the financial crisis of 2008. But otherwise, realistically speaking, the price of energy has been pretty stable for a very, very long period of time. If you sort of follow that through, what we see here, that's March 2020, the first pandemic, that's where we see the first significant price drop in years. And that's where sort of volatility was introduced into the market that the market is still attempting to recover from. As someone put it quite nicely sort of at work a couple of days ago, for 15 odd years, anyone who spoke about energy or energy procurement at sort of a commercial scale or even at a residential scale knew that the price of electricity was £50 per megawatt hour, for example, and therefore if you're having a good day, and a cheap rate for that would have been £35, a more expensive rate would have been £65. But that's sort of the parameters that we were working under. But actually, can we go to the next slide, please? If we look at the last 12 months, what we've got are sort of pretty significant geopolitical sort of happenings across Europe and across the world that have caused the price of electricity to sort of peak around 75. Whereas before it was sort of, as I said, on a bad day it was 65, but it hardly sort of reached there. So what this is the last 12 months in terms of sort of the electricity and gas markets and prices. What we see here is the worry, if you like, from the EU and from the UK around in the sort of run-up to winter last year with regards to the gas reserves across Europe and the UK. And so they were worried, or the governments were worried, that if we were to have a significantly cold winter or a cold snap, that our gas reserves would run much lower than they had initially planned for. And the risk was that if we were to have a colder than average winter or a cold snap, that risk would become real and material. As happened, that was not the case, and it did not come to fruition. Although winter last year was slightly colder than the previous years, it wasn't as cold as they were expecting, and so those gas reserve issues or concerns or risks when actually did not materialize. What we see here, sort of the first couple of months of 2022, the first 6 or 7 weeks, is a sort of an almost stabilization of the market. What we see here is the initial reaction, the initial market reaction to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And of course, Russia feeds the majority of Europe with gas, mainly through Germany and mainly through Nord Stream 1. And so as an initial reaction to the invasion, most of the EU countries and most of sort of the UK government as well plan to minimize their usage and consumption of Russian gas. And so we're limiting supply, but the demand is also there still. And so this is sort of the initial reaction. What then happened is sort of the prices dropped off again, stabilized at a slightly higher baseline than previously, but they were stable for a couple of months. And then we had a couple of events here, those two peaks, if you could see them, where usually they wouldn't even sort of register on an international sort of gas and electricity market scale. However, because of the risk with the Russian gas and the questions around Russian gas, we had a couple of minor sort of issues across some gas facilities across the US and Norway. And they were supposed to be down for a week and then ended up being actually down for 6 weeks. But again, because of the amount of risk that was already on the market, it registered as sort of significant blips in prices. Finally, what we see here is almost that final peak is a lot of sort of political gamesmanship between the EU specifically and Russia with regards to Nord Stream 1, the pipeline that Russia uses to feed Germany, and then from Germany feeds the rest of Europe with gas. In late June, early July, the pipeline went down due to sort of unforeseen maintenance issues it was at the time, and it turned out that they needed a turbine from Siemens, and because of the war in Ukraine, Siemens weren't able to actually deliver it to them. So there was a lot of sort of risk there that Russia might not actually open the pipeline again, and so that at this point, sort of up till sort of the middle of August, the pipeline was running at something like 40 or 50% capacity. The turbine was then sort of sent back and provided, and the pipeline was working at something like 80% capacity. And then sort of on the 2nd of September, for no reason whatsoever, as far as from an engineering perspective, as far as anyone can work out, Russia woke up one morning and decided to announce that they've closed down the pipeline completely. And so we are sort of early October now. It's been the best part of 4 or 5 weeks, and that pipeline still isn't open. What that means, and because it's sort of so far into the planning stage, if you like, for winter 2022, the prices of gas will not increase anymore this winter, because everyone, or most countries, have filled their gas reserves for this coming winter. I think late last week Europe was at 86%, and the UK was something like 91 or 92%. And what that means is for winter coming, prices have stabilized, although, having said that, stabilized quite high compared to the rest of the market, or sorry, compared to previous years. but there is a real risk sort of looking towards summer and more importantly looking towards winter next year that we're looking at sort of more major or more significant price hikes. Next slide, please. So what does that mean for us at home, or if you've got sort of businesses or offices? What does it mean for us when we've got to pay the bill at the end of the month? Next slide, please. So as Liz Truss was announced a couple of weeks ago, a month ago now, I think, one of her first announcements was with regards to the energy price cap for residential properties. And she announced a price cap at £2,500 per annum for electricity and gas for an average household. What that actually means is that they've taken an average, what they consider to be an average household, and then worked out that they could get away, or the best price that they can offer, or that the government can subsidise, is £2,500 per annum. What that means for us, though, is not that our house bills will be capped at £2,500. It doesn't work that way. So what they've done is they worked out that if they were to cap the prices at £2,500, your electricity rate will be 34 pence per kilowatt hour, and your gas will be 10.3 pence per kilowatt hour. Again, compared to sort of 24 months ago, so around 2 years ago, your price of electricity, you could get something like 12 pence per kilowatt hour. So we're talking again, we're talking nearly twice, 1.8 times the price as it was. Gas as well was around 2.5, 3 pence per kilowatt hour. So again, we're talking 3-4 times the price here. But what the price cap actually means is that the more you use, the more you'll pay. They will not cap you at £2,500. The more you use, the more you pay, and therefore, the more that we can sort of save and the more sort of energy efficient we're able to be, the less those bills will be. Next slide, please. And these are just a couple of sort of if you like, news articles with regards to the price increases. This was the outlook before Liz Truss's announcement in early September. We were looking at bills of around £3,350, give or take, in October, and then again over £3,600 in January. And that would have been a 200% increase compared to literally less than 2 years ago. However, now it's been capped at £2,500, but again, that's still a significant jump. Next slide, please. So what I'm hoping to do very quickly is just to put that jump into, just to sort of send that message through. I've taken a couple of sort of day-to-day activities, or maybe day-to-day sort of things that we would buy without thinking about, and just putting the same sort of inflation figures onto them as energy and gas, just so that we can sort of send them or get the message across, if you like. So here I just want you to shout at me. McDonald's fillet of fish was £3.19 this time last year. What do you think it would be today if the price sort of was inflated as much as sort of energy and gas? Just shout at me. £4. I've got £4.50. Any more? £7. Any more? £9. £6.20. £7. Let's click next if possible. It's actually £6.92, and therefore that's obviously quite a significant jump for what is a very small burger, to be fair to them, but it is what it is. Next slide, please. A litre of petrol. This is quite a hot topic. So around 12 months ago, the price of petrol per litre was around £1.35. And in fact, if you remember, so if you take yourselves back to 2020, I think the price of petrol reached £1 per litre, and that is the only time ever that since I've started driving that I was able to put the more expensive petrol in, and never again and never since, I don't think. But at £1.35 per litre, if we sort of follow the same logic, what would the price of a litre of petrol be today? £2.70. Any more? Any other guesses? £2.70. So if we click next, please, it's actually at £2.97. So £2.70 isn't a bad shout. Just to put that into perspective, if you've got a small family hatchback, so a Volkswagen Golf, for example, £2.97 a litre would equal somewhere between £140 and £150 for a full tank, and that's sort of the significant jump that we're looking at. And finally, if we just go to the next slide, this one's quite close to my heart. I do sort of have a very severe caffeine addiction. And so there's a Cafe Nero on the way between the office and between the train station that I sort of arrive at. And so that's my morning flat white, as everyone in the office now knows, is sort of one of those wajibat, if you like, of my morning at work. So at the moment, it's £3.50. Again, let's hazard guesses as to what the price would be if they were to follow a sort of similar inflationary trajectory. 10 quid. Any more, any less? 7.50. 7.90. If we go next, it's actually the best part of £7.70, and that might be one of the sort of reasons I would actually sort of look to do something about my caffeine addiction or my caffeine habits. But the whole reason sort of I've put those 3 slides in is just to sort of try and get the message across, because for someone like me, when we talk about kilowatts or kilowatt hours, it makes sense, but I fully understand that not everyone sort of talks in kilowatt hours and kilowatts, and therefore I was just hoping that these couple of slides are able just to show how severe an inflation trajectory energy prices are at the moment. If we can go to the next slide, please. So we'll do a couple of sort of energy reduction fact or fictions, and these are sort of questions that I've been asked previously as to sort of ways to heat or warm your house or save energy, and whether they're right or not. So next slide, please. So the first one is turning a light off saves more energy than turning it on and off. So if I were to turn a light off, is that more efficient than sort of constantly turning lights on and off? Fact or fiction? Fiction. Fiction. So I think the uncle here sort of stole my thunder, and I'm almost going to give him the mic and sort of sit down. But it's pretty much fiction. Actually having lights off is the most efficient way to save energy. And it's almost the golden rule, if you like, of energy management, is if you don't need it, you turn it off. And as someone, again, once told me, the most efficient type of light bulb is a light bulb that's not turned on at all. And so that's the general rule. Whereas the uncle sort of pointed out, I think some of the older types of lights, your filament light bulbs, everything along those lines, they need a burst of energy to warm up before they sort of emit light properly. And it's that burst of energy that historically would have used more electricity just to sort of keep it going instead of sort of turning it on and off. But that's where the fiction comes from. But with LED lights, with most of sort of the new lights on the market these days, it's just easier and more efficient to keep it off. Next, please. Oh, yeah. So that tick was supposed to signify a fiction. Fiction, yeah. The other one is, it is cheaper to keep your heating turned on always, but at a lower temperature. This is a very common one that I get sort of asked. So again, fact or fiction? Fact. Do you know what? Shall we do a hands up? Hands up for fact. Hands up for fiction. All right, can we click next? So it's actually fiction. It's not cheaper to keep your heating on always, but at a lower temperature. Having said that, and specifically if you've got sort of someone at home all the time, it does make sense to have your temperature on at a lower temperature. But if at any point during the day your house is vacant or your house is empty, the best thing to do is to turn it off and then turn it on sort of 5-10 minutes before you're back home, if you're able to do that remotely, or turn it on as soon as you're back home. Because otherwise, if you think of it, you're just heating empty space, and because it's empty space, and because there's no sort of human bodies that emit heat, and there's no sort of cooking, there's nothing along those lines happening, you're having to heat an environment that naturally wants to get colder. And so you're having to work extra hard to maintain it, even at a slightly lower temperature. So from an efficiency perspective, it's always better sort of to turn your heating systems off when they're not in use. Next slide, please. A dishwasher uses more energy than washing dishes by hand. Fact or fiction? Fact. All right, let's do hands. Okay, hands up for fact. So, and hands up for fiction. So a dishwasher uses more energy than... Can we click next, please? It's actually fiction. A dishwasher is much more efficient at... a dishwasher is much more efficient at washing dishes than doing that by hand, and that's for 2 reasons. One, the amount of water that a dishwasher uses is something like 20% of the total amount of water that washing dishes by hand uses. The other thing is you're having to heat the water that you're washing the dishes by, and therefore if you're using more water, you're wasting more energy heating water that's then being wasted. And finally, dishwashers and washing machines generally, especially if you've bought sort of one in the last, anywhere between the last sort of 7 and 10 years realistically, they're quite efficient. They've got very efficient water heaters and therefore don't actually use a lot of energy compared to sort of washing your dishes by hand. Next slide, please. And this is the final one. And this is quite a controversial one, but to heater or not to heater, that is the question. So is it more efficient to use these sort of standalone electric heaters at home, or is it less efficient? Okay, hands up for less efficient. Hands up for more efficient. Next. So this is a very controversial one, but it totally depends on the way that you're using your heaters. If you're having to warm up a small space or an individual room for a short amount of time, using one of these is much more efficient than having to heat the whole house. If you're having to heat a whole house, then these are very inefficient and very expensive to run. We're talking something like 70 pence a kilowatt hour. And so, sorry, 70 pence an hour even, running one of those. But again, it would cost you more to heat your whole house. So if you're only looking to warm one room for a short amount of time, it's more efficient to use one of those. But generally speaking, the best option is to sort of to heat your house using your sort of central heating system if you've got one, or the central system that you've got for heating. Next slide, please. So. So oil heaters, again, generally speaking, they rate somewhere between 2 and 3 kilowatts. And if you think sort of 1 kilowatt per hour costs the best part of 35 pence, you're talking, again, anywhere between 70 and £1.05 an hour. And so, again, if you've got the ability to control certain different rooms with your sort of central heating system, it makes better sense to do it that way. However, if you can't, then it probably makes more sense to use an oil heater for a short amount of time only. So next slide, please. So what can we do? The first thing that I wanted to go through are your electricity and gas meters at home. And so if you haven't got a smart meter already, I can only sort of highlight and suggest how helpful and how important they are, and how useful they are. So if you haven't got a smart meter at home, what you could do is you can call up your energy provider and ask them to come and install one for you. It's completely free of charge. They'll come in at a time that suits you, and it's a sort of half-an-hour job. And they'll have to cut your electricity and gas, I think, for 5 minutes, one at a time, just sort of to connect the system up. If you've already got a smart meter, or if you're looking to install one or have one installed, what I can suggest, or what I definitely suggest, is that you give them a call and ask them to activate the half-hourly reads option. And we'll go through that in the next slide, what a half-hourly read is and what it means and what you could do with half-hourly reads. This is slightly out of date, but it's still sort of accurate. If you haven't got a smart meter, please ensure that you've sent a meter reading on the 30th of September. Obviously, that's last week now. But if you haven't sent one on the 30th, please send one as soon as possible. Because the prices increase on the 1st of October, what energy companies will do is they'll estimate your consumption on the new rate. And what they'll do more often than not is they'll overestimate and therefore charge you more. And so if you haven't got a smart meter, please provide a meter reading as soon as possible. You can do that online if you've got an account, or there's a sort of automated phone line for most companies. And it's just sort of also good practice to give a meter reading sort of once every 3 months minimum. Yeah. Even if you're on a fixed tariff. So what a fixed, yeah, so what, So if you're on a fixed tariff, what that means is they'll estimate your consumption. The fixed tariff bit is the rate. So the 34 pence per kilowatt hour of electricity and the 10p for a kilowatt hour of gas, that doesn't change. That's the fixed bit. What they'll do is they'll work out, they'll say, we estimate you use 100 kilowatt hours every week, and therefore we'll charge you for 100 kilowatt hours. What will happen is that once every 13 months, I think it is, that is the standard, they should ask, or they should come and take a meter reading so that they're able to correct their estimation. So for example, if they've estimated you use 100 kilowatt hours a week, but actually you use 200, they've only charged you for half of the consumption that you've used. And therefore, after 12 months or after 13 months, whenever they come and take the meter read, they'll send you a bill with the correction because they've taken an accurate reading and they know exactly what you've used. They're not having to estimate it anymore. And if, yeah.
So does the contract change automatically?
So the contract remains, so they can only charge you, for example, 10 pence per kilowatt hour for electricity, but they'll charge you as to how much electricity you've used. So on a fixed rate, yeah. So the fixed rate is the rate itself, the price of energy, not the amount that you're going to use.
Sorry, on the new fixed rate or your contract?
Regardless, whether you're on a new fixed rate or a variable rate, the fixed part of any energy or gas price or energy or gas contract is the rate itself, the price of gas or electricity. But we go back to the more you use, the more you'll pay.
Correct, but what I don't understand
Yeah.
is if I don't provide my reading,
Yeah.
does that mean that 1st of October,
Yeah.
my fixed rate contract will automatically
Oh.
change to the new?
So no, so if you're on a fixed rate contract, it depends when that expires. Yeah. No, so it won't change until it expires. The day after it expires, it'll default back to the sort of, yeah.
So it's not necessary to provide them.
So no, but it's good practice to do so every 3 months because that means you're not risking a massive correction at the end of 12 months or whatever it is. And yeah, if you've got a smart meter, there's this new thing that I found out about a couple of days ago called the Hugo app. If you search it sort of on your smartphones, what it does is it collects your data and allows you to view your data on a day+1 basis. So today, I can log in and look at yesterday's information, yesterday's consumption, and understand, for example, why there's a peak at certain times and that there isn't a peak anymore. Next slide, please. So what this is an extract from my energy provider, and that's actually my sort of electricity consumption between the 12th of July and the 11th of August. And so if you've got a smart meter, you'll be able to log into your account online and have a look at your sort of consumption trends. And for example, it's quite easy to point, for example, on the 25th of July, I think that is, as a peak in consumption, also potentially the 28th as well. So the idea is that we pinpoint, or you're able to pinpoint what days, and over the last week, over the last month, that you've had a lot of sort of electricity consumption to then try and understand. Did something major happen? Did I have, for example, house refurbishment works happening that day and therefore I can explain it? If I can, that's fine, and at least we know the reasons. If I don't know why my energy consumption was so high on that specific day, then that is a problem because our energy consumption is no longer being controlled by us. It's sort of running amiss as is. Next slide, please. And just on the half-hourly bit, and it doesn't show, but what this is a sort of a read every 30 minutes of the day. So this is just the 6th of August, starting at sort of 12 o'clock midnight all the way through to 11:30 p.m. the next day. So this is a 24-hour extract of my energy consumption for that day. What's obvious is that overnight there's a lot of energy being utilized. And I know that's the case, and I know that's fine, because I was charging my electric car overnight that day. So I can explain this, and I can justify this peak. This peak here, which occurs around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, again, I can justify because that's when we turn the dishwasher on, if I remember correctly, or something along those lines, and therefore I understand why there's a peak there. If I couldn't explain why there was such a massive peak here or a massive peak here at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, that's where it becomes an issue. But the point is, so, yeah, yeah. So yeah, apologies. So this is peak as in the amount of electricity used, not the amount of sort of money you're being charged. Although having said that, one is plugged directly into the other. So the more electricity I use, the more sort of I'll be charged. But in terms of peak here, I mean in terms of sort of amount of electricity used. And if you look here on the x-axis, that's kilowatt hours. That's the total amount of kilowatt hours used. And so, for example, at this point, in this half hour, I used 2.5, and then as we sort of discussed earlier on, the rate is 34 pence per kilowatt hour, and therefore to work out how much that's going to cost, it's literally 2.5 times 34, and I'm not going to try and do the maths sort of while stood up here. But that's how we work it out. But the point is, in terms of if we see a peak in energy consumption that we can explain, then that's fine. If we can see a peak here, for example, again, but we can't explain and we don't understand why we've used so much more electricity than the baseline, that's where we start to have issues. But the point is, without a smart meter and without someone having a look at this data, so once a week, once a month, whatever it is, it becomes very difficult to understand where that wastage is and where we're wasting energy and at what times, really. Next slide, please. The next one, now we move on to what we can actually do to sort of save on our energy at home. LED light bulbs, LED light bulbs, LED light bulbs. They are the sort of the one silver bullet in terms of in energy management that exists. There aren't any easy answers out there. There aren't any cheap answers out there from a sort of decarbonization perspective or to save energy. However, LED lights are that one silver bullet. Most light bulbs, most LED light bulbs would use something like between 80 and 90% less energy than your average sort of normal filament light bulb. And depending on how old your lights are, it can even be more significant than that. I think so. These ones are LEDs. The old style of these lights here at Stanmore, for example, they would have used something like 95% more electricity than your LED light bulbs here, than your LED lights here. And so it has a significant impact. And when you think sort of we're coming into the winter where naturally we'll have our lights on for longer, it starts to make a significant difference having much more efficient and much less energy intensive options.
So, I think we'll take a quick break there for a few questions, just because they're piling up, and give you a chance to drink some water. If I can summarize a few things that can be said a different way, price in electricity is basically going up, and the markets are making it more expensive. At the end of the day, we'll be paying for it. The government has decided to step in for 2 years and limit how much you will pay for 2 years. But you're still going to be charged based on what you use. Okay, so that's very important to understand. So those figures of 35p per kilowatt hour, last year you were paying 12p per kilowatt hour. So it's still a big jump compared to last year. So it's really important you understand what you are using in your home, in your businesses, so that you don't pay too much, or don't go out of pocket for that matter. What he was trying to say about the smart meter is that data is important. If you don't understand what is using energy in your house, whether it's the heating or the electricity, if your daughter's running, I don't know, their iPad 24/7 and it's killing your energy supply, or if your wife is washing clothes every half an hour, you need to understand where that energy is going. And the only way you will is through a smart meter, because that's the only device that will give you the information that you need. The old traditional meters will only tell you how much has been used, but will not be able to tell you every half an hour, this is where the energy was, or this is where the spike is. Okay. I think there was a question about small spaces. Yeah. If I have an electric or an oil radiator, which is not from my gas central system, which one is more economical to use to heat up that small space?
So if I can just hold that answer for a few more slides, because there's a slide on heating specifically. And that sort of electric heating question was just sort of a preparation or preamble to that slide.
So I think a few of these questions probably come up a bit later. So solar panels, how to control heating downstairs when you're only downstairs, things like that. Could we pull up the last slide about lighting, please? So I think this is really important, and I think a lot of us understand this already, but in general, LED light bulbs will save you a lot of energy. So this is a halogen light bulb, and can you see there's a wire inside, and you can see the brightness in the middle? That's how you know it's a halogen light bulb. The glass is always clear on the outside, and you can see through, and it always takes a little while to heat up, and then it produces a lot of light. But this will take something like 60 watts of energy, whereas this bulb, which gives you the same amount of light, will take 5 watts. So that's a significant difference in terms of power consumption to produce the same light. These two are good examples of what an LED bulb looks like. So if you can see this, there's a different mechanism inside that doesn't look like this. It's almost going to be an LED. If you're not sure, just read the small light writing. on the bulb itself. If you see a bulb with a frosted glass, it's almost always going to be an LED. And actually, I believe these strips are frosted on the outside. But that, if you're not sure about your house, go around and look at every bulb you've got, even in the garage, even in the shed, even in the garden, in the decking, even in your driveway, some of you have lights. Make sure, if you can change them to LED, the money you will spend on the LED will be saved very quickly, because LEDs are actually quite cheap. All right? Okay. You had some water? Yeah?
So that's a very good point. Actually, yeah. So the question was, if you've got sort of one of those outdoor lights, will the fitment or will the housing, the lighting housing, be appropriate for an LED light bulb? Generally speaking, 95% of the fittings across that are available commercially and residentially, unless they're from sort of decades ago, there is an LED alternative to them. And generally speaking, you'll find an alternative for almost any light fitment. Again, having done this at home and across some of our offices over the last 10 months or so, I've not once had to sort of install or procure a new light fitting. And so more often than not, there is an alternative.
If I can add to that, every bulb has the metal bit at the bottom, and that's the type of bulb that will go into your light, right? So it will either be a screw like this, or like this, or it will be the one with 2 pins on the side. And then there's a few others, so there's big and small versions of each, but there's only about 6 different types, and they're very, very common across the board. For light strips like this, if you look carefully at this light, you'll see there's a wire at the back. All you need is electricity getting to that point. You connect the wires and it works. Yeah? So I did this at home a couple of months ago, and I managed to do it myself. Just switch off the electricity before you do it. There's a disclaimer on this, yeah? Yeah. Okay. Don't do DIY without official advice. We'll take a question from the ladies.
Not from an LED perspective. So with LEDs, you get sort of every option available in terms of brightness, in terms of color, in terms of even temperature that they operate at. However, generally speaking, again, they are limited to something like 5 watts for your normal sort of bulb at home. And so what they give you is they give you the option of choosing what color without having to compromise on the energy usage. Yeah, so long life bulbs from a filament light bulb perspective would be somewhere between sort of 4 and 5 years for most LED light bulbs, and they don't even have to be sort of the more expensive ones. Most will come with a 10-year guarantee as standard, and most will stay for longer than 10 years. And actually, the light bit here isn't the bit that breaks, but there's sort of a heat sink somewhere inside that is usually the thing that breaks. But generally speaking, most LED light bulbs will come with a guarantee of at least 10 years. I've seen some with 25 years, although they're slightly more expensive. But again, you're having to replace your light bulbs less often as well with LEDs. No, so you've got long life ones that come as filament light bulbs and long life ones that come as LEDs. So again, you'll have to check.
If I can add to that, the one I got, it had a switch on the side. You can pick 3 different colors, so whatever you feel like. So it depends. Really, the market is there. I strongly recommend you look at Toolstation or Screwfix for good deals. And online, it's amazing how much is on Amazon these days. So, do shop around. You'll find what you're looking for, and you might even find something better than you had before. Now, this is very much a case of spend money to save money. So don't go crazy and spend £300 expecting to save £30. So do your maths. But in general, for every bulb you would replace, over a year, you will probably pay the price of the bulb given current prices in the market. Okay? So in general, if you invest now, you will save a lot of money going forward. I'm hoping we can give your email so they can ask you for advice at the end of this. Yeah?
Of course.
Do you have any more questions before we move on? Yes.
So electric showers, electric water heating points are what we refer to as point-of-use heaters. Generally speaking, they are more expensive. However, some of the newer ones that there are on the market are very, very efficient. But again, it depends on how long your shower is. Your morning shower is more often than not. Again, but having said that, in order to pay an amount of money sort of to convert your electric shower to a gas-powered, a shower with water that's heated by gas, I don't think that will sort of be worth the investment, to be completely honest, especially if you've got a shower from the last couple of years specifically. They're very efficient.
So there's a question, are the GU9 and 10 bulbs efficient and are they available in LED? So GU9 and 10 simply refers to the type of fitting. Yes, the way that says B22, that's the type of fitting, okay? So yes, they are available in LED and it depends what you buy. Should we change the original energy-saving bulbs? Okay, he's saying yes?
Yeah, as long as they're not LED, just change them to LEDs.
Okay.
It's such a significant difference and such a significant saving. Even if you've got energy-saving light bulbs, as long as they're not LEDs, at current electricity rates, it is cheaper, and you'll get your money back within sort of 12 months. If you change them to LEDs, we're talking significant cuts back. And it's, as I said, it's the one silver bullet that we've got, or one golden solution from an energy efficiency perspective that we can always sort of point to pretty confidently. Recycle them. Recycle them, recycle them, recycle them.
Okay, last question. Can we still send the meter readings after the 30th September date has passed?
Yeah. So you can give a meter reading every day if you want. But if you haven't got a smart meter, then the recommendation is once every 3 months. I think your utility company would ask for one every 6 months minimum, and if not... Yeah, exactly. So if you've got an account with them online, you can just plug it in online, or you can give them a call. Most companies will have an automated meter reading phone number that you just give them and provide them a meter reading. But yeah. But even if it's so, after the 30th of September, please give them a meter reading as soon as.
So to clarify that point, on the 1st of October, the prices went up because the cap changed to what the government has decided to pay. So everything that you use until the 30th of September, you are charged a lower price. And then from the 1st of October onwards, you're charged the higher price. So by giving a meter reading, you're more likely to put more of that energy into the older price. Whereas if you wait another 3 months, they'll average all your usage from this meter reading till the last one and charge you half at the old price and half at the new price. Whereas you might have used more of it in the old price, for example, right? That's why it's important to give a meter reading now.
That's not correct. It's depending on the contract. If you've got a fixed contract,
Yeah.
which hasn't run out,
Yeah.
they won't charge you.
Yeah. So generally speaking, if you've got a fixed contract, and because they haven't been offering fixed contracts for 18, 19 months now, I think it is off the top of my head. So most people who were on a fixed contract will have defaulted automatically back onto the default prices, because most contracts would have been 12 or 24 months. So if you've got a fixed contract that you signed sort of 24 months ago, the most likelihood is that your fixed price would be guaranteed for 12 months or 24 months. The fact is the market hasn't provided or hasn't offered residential fixed prices since June last year. So we're talking sort of 15, 16 months already. And so most people who would have been on a fixed price contract have now defaulted back on a variable contract, yeah.
But our fixed contract is ending in September 23.
Yeah.
So therefore, you won't charge me.
Yeah, so you're covered until September 23. Yeah. But generally speaking, again, most people, and so myself included, my parents' house is included there as well, our fixed contract ended at a time when the market wasn't, and still isn't, offering fixed prices anymore. And so we'd automatically default onto the sort of variable tariff.
So for those online, the fixed contract for this gentleman was ending September 23 next year. So his question was, will he get charged the prices he agreed with the energy company or the price cap prices? If you have made a contract with an energy company that is fixed, you are bound by that fixed contract, so you will pay those fixed prices until it expires. So 1st of October 2023, you need to give a meter reading. Okay? because then you'll put all your energy into the old price. Okay? Sorry.
No. So if you've got a smart meter and it's working, and that's an important thing to check. If you've got a smart meter and it's working, you don't need to provide meter reads. But you've got to make sure it's working, sort of sending meter reads. So look at the last bill that you've received. On the second page, they'll give you a breakdown of your charges, and it'll give you meter reading, and it'll give you 5 or 6 numbers. After those 5 or 6 numbers, there'll either be an A within brackets or an E within brackets. If it's A, it's actual, and therefore your meter is working. If it's E, it's estimated, and therefore your meter isn't working. So in theory, it's the energy provider's responsibility to let you know. However, in practice, they will not let you know. They will just knock on your door one day and ask for a meter reading, and then you'll ask, well, I've got a smart meter, why do you need a meter reading? And they'll say, oh, it's not worked for the last 12 months.
It's time to be smart, people. If you don't know if it's working, you need to check. Okay? So most companies will have apps. You can actually check if your meters.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know.
So if they knock on your door, is there things one can...
So this is not a case of he said, she said. You want to check your bill, and what does your bill say? Because if you have a smart meter, it should be submitting readings on your behalf. So if it says estimated, that meter is not working, you need to call them and say, come fix it. Okay? So the place to find out is your meter bill. I appreciate there's lots of questions. He still has a lot to go through. We'll be here till midnight if he has his way. Okay? I'm going to take one more question from the ladies if there is. Otherwise, we'll move on. Anybody? No? Okay, last question.
Go for it. Yeah. Yeah. So you can ask for your bills to be based on sort of your accurate readings. So if you've got a smart meter, and generally, more often than not, you'll automatically be moved to sort of the accurate way of billing. However, if you've asked for, or historically you've asked for, to pay a fixed amount every month, what they'll do is they'll charge you, for example, £100 a month, but at the end of the year, take the actual meter read and reconcile the difference. So if they should have charged you £150 a month, they'll then charge you the difference after 12 months. But, yeah, so it depends on the reading. Yeah. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so these energy companies, what they do is they know in the summer you don't switch on your heating, so you use less energy, and therefore you are charged less. In the winter, you switch on your heating, you use more energy, you're charged more. Okay, so what they do is that figure that Liz Truss is quoting, average £2,500 per household, they say, okay, this house is going to use roughly £2,500. So instead of charging them less in summer and more in winter, we're going to average it out throughout the year so that they don't feel like their bills are going down and up all the time. Okay, and that's why you're probably being on a fixed rate, because they have guessed roughly that you need to pay, I don't know, £200 a month, so that at the end of the year you have paid for all the energy that you've used. Now there'll always be a bit of fluctuation because you might have used too much or too little. So either they'll owe you money or you owe them money. Okay, but you can change that to actual bills if you change it to I pay what I use. But the reality is if you do that, in the winter you'll pay more, and in the summer you'll pay much less. Although at the end of the year you'll pay the same amount of money. Make sense? Okay. So just understand all this before you start making these changes, because if you suddenly go to them and say I'll pay what I owe, in winter you'll have high bills. And given the coming winter with the expense of food and everything else, you need to think about your cash flow. Okay? Okay, I think that takes us so far. Are you okay to go on?
Yeah. Next slide, please. So the other sort of major source of energy inefficiency, if you like, is heating. In essence, heating a house that's full of holes or full of areas where your hot air may escape from. So one of the easiest, or one of the sort of most obvious ways where heat escapes is through cracks in your windows, cracks between sort of your window and your wall type of thing. So for example, if you sort of walk around your house and you've got sort of these cracks beneath the window plastic and your wall, you know that there is a small amount of sort of heat that escapes from there. Also, depending on the age of your window, these black sills erode over time, and so a lot of them will allow heat to seep out and therefore sort of cold air to come in. So one of the easiest and quickest fixes that you can do if you haven't got sort of windows that are 5 years or newer is to sort of take a caulking gun, which is something like £3 or £4 from your average sort of any utility store, and just effectively put a line of cork through there and a line of cork through there. And actually there are companies that will come and maintain your windows for you, but realistically speaking, all they're going to do is take a caulking gun and sort of put that around your window. It's not, I've done it, and if I always live by the rule that if I can do it, then most people can do it. I'm not the most practical person. And so, yeah, that's one of the ways that you could sort of start to draft-proof your house and draft-proof your windows. Next slide, please. The other one is doors. So this is actually a door from my house that leads onto the garage. And the garage is obviously outside and not heated, and therefore through here, what we noticed last winter was at the bottom of the door and through the sides of the door, there was a lot of sort of cold air coming in. And so again, we can't go back to draft proofing. And there are a couple of sort of £5 solutions. It's called a door draft proof something. You effectively stick it at the bottom of your door, and what that does is it sticks to the wall and makes sure that there's no sort of cold air coming from the bottom. But also you can get those draft proof strips, I think they're called, and you can again stick it around sort of the door, if you like, and that'll stop the air coming or cold air sort of coming in. There's also I've got a list of these solutions that I'm sort of referring to, and we'll share them out. I think Hassan said we might have the list online, just so that you can access them and you know what to buy, with links and everything and then prices. Next slide, please. Yeah. So there is. It's called a thermal imaging camera. They're £800-900 a piece. Having said that. Hang on, just bear with. Yeah, I've got it actually. So what this is a £30 sort of thermometer. What you do is you point it at something and it'll give you the temperature. This is a very useful and handy tool generally around the house, but also if you wanted to sort of see if you've got sort of massive temperature differences in different areas around your house. And actually a very good way to check if your windows are seeping any or heat through is to touch them. So if you've warmed your house or you've warmed your room that you're in, all you've got to do is touch your window. If it's much colder than the rest of the room, that's seeping energy, that's seeping heat. If it's around the same temperature or only slightly cooler, that's fine. That means there's no energy sort of seepage or escapage through the window. But if it's significantly colder, that means that window is passing energy through, and therefore you're heating your room, and all that heat is then escaping or attempting to escape through the window. And this is just another example. That's my front door again, where for some reason the previous owner of the house had a very shoddy piece of work done, which was again letting a lot of cold air in. So another thing, just literally a caulking gun, and I actually should have brought one with me just to show you. But yeah, literally just cork that, and that'll be fine. Next slide, please. And final example of my very, that is my hand actually, and that is my kitchen. But these are just more examples where energy or cold air can escape from, and heat can escape from your house from. So if anything leads to the outside world and isn't properly closed off or sealed, what that'll do is you'll have sort of heat escaping. And what that means, because that's on the floor, it means your floor and therefore your feet will be much colder compared to the rest of the house, compared to the rest of your body, sorry. And so yeah, next slide. So effectively anything that can lead to the outside world but isn't sealed off needs to be sealed off. Next slide, please. Thermostats and boilers. This is a sort of very important one. So we'll start with the boiler. So this is your boiler control panel. The first thing that you need to make sure is that the pressure is right. It's not too low and it's not too high. And most boilers, if not all boilers, will come in with this green triangle here. And what you need to do is to ensure that the pressure that your boiler is working at falls somewhere within the green triangle. What that means is that your boiler isn't working extra hard to heat the water for your sort of hot water usage or for your central heating, and therefore not wasting energy. The other thing to do is those two dials here. Some of the newer boilers will have the letter E somewhere here, and what the boiler manufacturer's recommendation is to set your dials to the letter E if you've got them, because that means that they'll run at the most efficient setting that the boiler is designed for. If you haven't got a letter E, simply turning the temperature a bit lower also makes a difference, because you're not having to heat the water to as high a temperature as possible. So here it would heat the water to 80 degrees, but no one can use water at 80 degrees, for example. And I know for a fact that this is around 42, 43 degrees I've currently set that at, and that's perfect, if not slightly too warm as well. And so, yeah, that's from a boiler perspective. Servicing is very important. Now, most boiler manufacturers will tell you that you'll need to service your boiler every 12 months. Realistically speaking, and don't quote me and don't sort of hold me to account on this, you can service a boiler once every 3 years and it'll still be fine, but definitely not any less often than once every 3 years. What happens is boilers usually get clogged up, either with soot or material, or the fan that they use to blow out the gas, that gets blocked with dust or anything along those lines, and therefore the boiler is again having to work extra hard to dissipate the energy or dissipate all the wastage, and therefore wasting more energy. So if you haven't had the boiler serviced any time in the last 3 years, I'd definitely sort of recommend calling someone in to have a look. The other one is your thermostat. So those two are sort of older style thermostats, and that's where you sort of set the temperature and leave it on. The whole house warms to that specific temperature. This one is a timer. So if you look behind the X, there's off, timed once, and on. So if you set it on a timer, it'll turn on regardless of how hot or cold the temperature is. So for example, if back in June when it was 40 degrees, that setting was still on timed, the heating would turn on at home at that specific time. And so both of them aren't ideal because they don't give you the level of controllability that realistically you'd need. What is recommended, although is slightly more expensive as a solution, are smart thermostats. So I think Hive and Nest do smart thermostats for something like £180, give or take. And you'll need sort of a plumber to come in and install them. But what that does is, one, it gives you the ability to turn your heating on and off from your phone, but also allows you to put thermometers around your house. So, for example, if you wanted to heat your house when it was 19 degrees or colder, then you just set the thermometer, for example, in your living room and leave it there, and it'll automatically talk to the thermostat and tell it that actually it's 18 degrees now. It's time to sort of warm up the house. But what it also does, it allows you to control it from your phone. And so, for example, if you're going on holiday for 2 weeks, you can turn it off in the knowledge that 6 hours before you're back home, you can turn it on again, for example, and your home is warm. And that, again, negates the need for you to leave your heating on at a lower temperature, but constantly. Next slide, please. Yeah. Yeah. So can we go back to the previous slide, sorry. So the flow rate is these two. So the way that a boiler works is that it heats water. So you've got one sized flame, if you like, under a pipe of water. The more you want to heat the water, the less flow that you've got running across that pipe at a certain given time. So the less you want the lower the temperature, if you like, obviously the less energy that it uses, and so you'd adjust flow rates again through these two dials. And again, if you've got the E, that's where you solve, and that's the most efficient setting. Yeah, if you sort of, again. So if you haven't got an E on your boiler, then you can also sort of search your boiler model online, and it'll have a sort of the list of temperatures or the list of settings that it's most efficient at. Next slide, please. The next one is about radiators. So the first thing you should do sort of every winter, and this is best practice as well as anything else, is to make sure that they're degassed. And what that means is sort of this bit here, you sort of unscrew it ever so slightly, and if water comes out, then you know there's no gas in your system. But actually, if water doesn't come out and it seeps gas, that means there's gas in the system, and therefore your radiators won't heat as quickly or as efficiently. And again, so that means your boiler has to work harder to heat your home, and therefore you're wasting energy. And so the first thing to do sort of in the preparation for for winter, every year, is to degas all your radiators. The other thing that you can do is also ensure that your upper level radiators are set to a lower temperature than your lower level radiators. So for example, if you live in a house, the radiators on the first floor need not be on as high a temperature setting as the ground floor, because heat naturally goes up, and therefore when you heat downstairs, that heat automatically tries to rise and therefore does some of the heating for your first floor, and so you don't need to work the radiators on your first floor as much as possible. The other thing to consider is to install smart radiator valves, which is this bit here, which again, just to sort of bring it back to the electrical heating question or fact or fiction bit at the start, what we should strive for is complete and total controllability of all your heating across the house. At the moment, the only way to control radiators is by physically twisting those valves. If you've got smart valves, and again, I think they're £60 or £70 in most places, you're able to control them from your phone, and therefore if you know that you're going to be sort of in the living room for the next 4 hours, for example, you can turn the heating on in the living room, but turn it off across the rest of the house. At the moment, if you were to do that, that would mean you going to every radiator and sort of closing that off. But with a smart valve, you're able to do that straight from your phone. And also, if you think of it sort of from an overnight perspective, for example, that means you wouldn't need to heat the whole house to keep your bedroom warm. You can control it so that it's only your bedroom that's being warmed up. Yeah, so the numbers, so my one goes from 0 to 6, with 6 being the hottest and 0 being turned off. And so the warmer you want it, the higher the number, and the less warm you want it, the lower the number. No, sorry, that's a box standard valve. I'm in the process of getting smart valves installed. But yeah, that's your sort of normal box standard valve. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, there's a question. Yeah. 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 So from a dampness perspective, and again, no, of course. From a dampness perspective, the recommendation is 100% don't turn your heating on across the house sort of once a week or whatever it is. But it's more that dampness sort of is created, or if you like, over a long period of time, over months, in cold, damp conditions, obviously. And so having your heating on across the house, for example, for a couple of hours once a week is fine, because that then deals with that as much as possible. Dampness also has sort of more long-term solutions, like sort of damp-proof paint, for example, or damp-proof the layer that goes beneath the paint layer. Primer. Thank you. So damp-proof primer, for example, these are probably better solutions to deal with damp. And actually, damp also points to seepage, if you like, of water or moisture from outside to inside. So that means there's a hole or something somewhere that's allowing that moisture to come in and stay within the house. So again, I'd also look at that, or look for a solution for that problem. Yeah. 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 So the question was, in the US and in colder countries generally, if the if the boilers effectively are frozen or the water inside the pipes are frozen and you turn the boiler on, what tends to happen sometimes is that the pipes or the boiler pops or bursts. That it actually happened, I think here, the last time was the Beast from the East, if anyone remembers. I think it was March 2018 where we had a couple of those occurrences happening. Generally speaking, London doesn't ever get cold enough for that to happen except in extreme cases. Cities up north, Bolton for example, Scotland definitely, areas of Wales and Northern Ireland, all of them do have that issue, and therefore boilers, even the ones that you can get here, will have frost protection mode on. And so if the boiler realizes that it's getting to 5 degrees or lower, it will automatically heat itself and heat the water within the system so that it doesn't freeze and therefore popping the pipes. But so if you've got sort of frost protection mode, it should automatically be enabled. I'd just double check that. But realistically speaking, in London at least, it's not as big a risk or as big a concern as maybe other areas within the country. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. They should do. They should do.
So does the frost kick in automatically when you switch off the timer?
Yeah, yeah. So the frost protection system is an automatic system within the boiler. It's nothing you can control, but it's the boiler itself looking at the temperatures, looking at its own temperature and realizing that it's getting a bit too cold and there is a risk of freezing and therefore the pipes bursting, so it will warm itself up automatically. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Remove the excess air from the radiator. Yeah.
Thank you. So good. So far, so good. I've learned a lot. So I've had a question. What is a caulking gun?
I've got one at home. I should have brought one.
AV team, if you can use Google to kindly show that picture.
Please.
It's caulking, Caulking, not Cork.
Exactly. So the bits around the door, they're called draft excluders, yeah. But for the window, you need something that you're able to sort of to stick in place, which is what a caulking gun is.
So in terms of products, there's quite a few things available. There's stuff that looks like rubber that you stick against your door. And when the door closes, it seals against the rubber.
Yeah.
There is stuff you put, there's a gap at the bottom of the door. So you can cover that gap. So his door to his garage. There are a few products that come. There's one that slides in the door. There's a brush. There is literally something like a paperweight. You drop it there and that's it. It does the job. And then in the summer you don't use it. Yeah. They're putting it up soon. Okay. There we go. That is a caulking gun. Now the white bit, there are lots of products you can buy inside. But essentially you squeeze here, the metal pushes the material out, and you use the nozzle to apply it across the crack that you're trying to fill. Okay, and they come in a variety of different materials, so do your research before you buy them.
Just very quickly, there's indoor ones and outdoor ones. I'd get the cheapest ones possible, but for indoor, use the indoor cork, and for the outdoor, use the outdoor cork, because that's more weatherproof. But generally, you don't need to go for the expensive sort of £10, £15 ones. You can get them for £2.50 or £3, I think last time I checked. So it's permanent for 12 to 18 months more often than not, but they'll degrade naturally and they'll need to be redone again in preparation for next winter. But at least for this winter, they'll keep you going. So the question was with regards to the cost of the boiler and whether it will age of the boiler and whether it will cost more depending on the age. So if generally, and I think British Gas's recommendation is 20 years. If your boiler is 20 years or older, they recommend you change that because the efficiency of the newer ones are significant enough that you'll make the money sort of within a handful of years and within definitely the lifetime of the new boiler. But yeah, so if you've got a boiler that's older than 20 years, I'd maybe look at changing them. And there's a lot of financing options out there as well, 0% interest, everything along those lines. And just talk to your utility company. and they'll be able sort of just to discuss all the options available for you. Yeah. So if you've bought a boiler 20 years ago, it'll be a 20-year model. Generally speaking, you get new boilers every 12 to 18 months. And so usually, for example, if you were to install a boiler today, they won't install something from 5 years ago. It'll be sort of within the last 12 months or so.
Okay, so I just want to give you a few points of clarification, then I have some questions from online. So with the radiator valves, what these things do, like you said, the higher the number, the higher the temperature. So what that means is the whole radiator will still heat up. But if this is on number 3, for example, the inbuilt setting will be 15 degrees. When your room reaches 15 degrees, this valve will switch this off, so no more hot water will go into the radiator. So that's what he means by it won't fill up the radiator anymore. And the benefit of that is that the boiler has to work less hard now to heat the rest of the radiators. And that's where you'll make your savings because less energy is being used. With the smart radiator valves, they are expensive, and it's more a long-term game. But what they allow you to do is to control it from your phone, so remotely. So as your situations at home change, you can change those settings depending on what your needs are. So for example, if you're having a gathering at home for the next 6 hours, and you know nobody's going to be upstairs for the next 6 hours, whereas usually you'd all be upstairs watching Netflix or whatever, you could tell the valves switch off, don't switch on at all. So it will heat the bottom of the house, but it won't heat the top of the house. And that answers some of the questions. There was a question of dampness. Dampness is a slightly complicated topic, but there's 2 aspects of it that everyone should know. Number 1, dampness is water that settles on a cold area. Okay, that's that black mold that you're seeing because it's wet. The water comes from our own use. So when you're drying your clothes in your house, when you're boiling water in your house, if you don't switch on your extractor fans, the water doesn't go out of the house. So it then goes in your house. And that water, you can't see it, but it will go to the coldest part of your house. And that's almost always at the top of the house. Now, for some people, that might be downstairs in the utility room, but for other people, it's most likely going to be in the loft somewhere. Okay? So water that is in the house will then go and settle in a cold part of the house. That doesn't mean you go and heat up your loft because you'll be wasting money for no reason. But just understand the principles that it's about how much water you introduce in your house and then where that water goes. And there are treatments and things that you can apply if you have a problematic wall, for example, that keeps getting damp, then there are paints and things that you can apply. There are builders who will replace the plaster with damp-resistant plaster, for example. So it can be quite expensive, but it depends how far you want to go with it. Okay, so we seem to have quite a few questions on smart meters, if you don't mind. So I think a bit of debunking is necessary. So a quick fire round on smart meters. Is there a disadvantage to installing smart meters?
No, none whatsoever.
It's free, right?
It's free.
Yeah. What savings can one make with a prepaid meter?
So again, regardless of the type of meter that you've got installed, it's what you do after the meter. So it's what systems or what equipment you've got turned on after the meter that the meter will then measure for. So whether it's a smart meter or a prepaid meter or a normal meter, it makes no difference if you've still got all your lights on all day, every day type of thing. It'll still use the same amount of energy.
So that leads me on to the next question. There are a lot of myths that smart meters give higher readings than your actual usage. Is this true?
No. So smart meters, the ones that you've got at home, will be mid-C approved, and what that is a British standard from the UK government that holds all metering manufacturers to, and therefore every meter will be stress tested at a manufacturer before it's out to be installed, and having, again, done hundreds and hundreds of sort of meter installations across sort of both at home and at work, I've never had one, and we've tested them, I've never had one that's come back with sort of providing meter reads that aren't accurate. And so there's very, very, very little risk of sort of smart meters giving readings that are higher than they should be.
But before you said they might not be working, so...
What do you mean?
You said check if your meter is working or not, right?
No, so the meter works. The meter will read accurately. By not working, I mean it does not work as a smart meter and therefore will not send the data out. But the meter as a meter will continue reading or will continue storing the data. But that's exactly that signal, that SIM card that it uses to transmit the data will stop working, and that's the bit that stops working. But the meter as a sort of the swirly thing that turns around and counts
Okay,
your electricity consumption, that will not break.
To say it a different way, the meter in your car that tells you how many miles you've done is electronic, right? But you trust it. It's the same thing, that the actual functionality, it will keep tracking how much you use. The smart bit is it's able to send it to your supplier to say he's using X amount, all right? I read that energy companies will use your smart meter to see when your peak usage is in each day over 24 hours and then charge you more for the peak usage. Is that true?
No, so there's two things happening there. The reason why there's been such a massive push for smart meters is because utility companies need to understand at what points in the day there is a higher level of consumption, because electricity isn't like gas or like water or grains, for example, that can be stored and we can access it at any point. It needs to be generated and utilized within 15 minutes. And so the electricity that we're using currently, for example, for these lights, was generated at maximum 15 minutes ago. And so they need to understand what levels and what volumes of electricity they need to generate at any given point in time so that everyone's got enough electricity, but not too much that the grid becomes unbalanced and we've got and the grid goes down. The other bit about charging extra, those charges are available with smart meters. And just to explain, between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. and then 6 a.m. and 7 a.m. every day, the national grid hits peak in terms of consumption, in terms of demand, and therefore what is potentially an option and was an option with fixed rate contracts, was that they'll offer you two rates, an off-peak rate and an on-peak rate. So for an on-peak rate, it'll be between 6 and 7 in the morning and 5 p.m. and 7:30 or 7 p.m. at night they'll give you. And they'll charge you extra for electricity used at that time. But at the same time, they'll charge you much less for off-peak hour usage, so that they encourage you, one, for example, to wash your clothes or do your dishes off-peak hours, so it costs you less, and that means they don't need to generate as much electricity during peak hours. So it is an option, but it doesn't mean that they can't charge you without letting you know what the prices are. You will not be charged, or you cannot be charged legally without letting you know what the prices are, what the rates are, and when they'll charge you for what. Also, if you've got an electric car, what some utility providers will do is they'll offer you a super reduced rate from 12 a.m. till 6 a.m., for example. So 12 midnight till 6 in the morning when no one uses electricity. And so I would have utilized that had I had the option, but what that means, it would make charging my car overnight much cheaper than it currently is, because I'm not having to use a lot of energy to charge a car during peak hours. I just charge it overnight when it's much lower. So smart meters give you access to all these potential money-saving or rate-reducing options, but you need to have a smart meter first to do that.
If I have a prepaid meter, should I switch to a smart meter?
Yes.
Does everyone know what a prepaid meter is?
Yeah.
Okay, so good answer. Just for those who didn't hear or online, a prepaid meter is a meter where you have to put the money in before you actually use any of the energy.
It's a pay-as-you-go.
So if there's no balance on it, you're not got any electricity or gas. Okay. Not many people I know in London are on prepaid meters, but there is an option for a smart meter as well. As a general rule, if you're on a prepaid meter, you pay a higher price compared to someone who's not on a prepaid meter. And your energy company will actually replace it for free if you ask them to, but the wait time may be like 3 to 6 months. There's a question here about smart thermostats. I've just bought one, so I'll answer this one.
Yeah.
Which one should you use? So a few of the major brands are Nest, which is owned by Google. There's Hive, which is owned by British Gas. Tado, T-A-D-O, and Honeywell. I think it really depends on what you need for your house and what your plans are in terms of what you're going to use. So first question I would say is, can you afford it? Second question is your boiler going to work with that piece of equipment? Because not all boilers will work with all electronic equipment, okay? Because you're pretty much taking this boiler that's there and adding something extra onto it, and then getting the two to talk to each other. So that has to be able to happen. So do your research first. If you go for a Nest, for example, they only sell a thermostat. They don't sell the smart radiator valves. So if your plan is to add smart radiator valves later, it makes sense to buy them from a company that sells both the thermostat and the smart radiator valves. Okay? So I went for Hive because it's the only one that will talk to my boiler, but also they have smart radiator valves later, so if the price ever drops, I'll think about getting some. What if the radiator doesn't have these numbered valves?
So if it doesn't, then you can get these numbered valves and install them. I think, again, this off the top of my head, there's something like £8 or £9 for one of those valves.
Plumber's about 40 quid an hour.
Yeah, but again, having said that, if all you need to do is sort of twist this off and then take the old one off and replace it with this one, it's not. Again, I've done it once and I've survived sort of to tell the tale, and therefore, again, I live by the general rule that if I can do it, then I think it's not.
Guys, we have a disclaimer. Yeah, no DIY.
Yeah.
Basically, what he's trying to say is they're quite cheap if you wanted to replace them. You could pretty much replace the whole house for about £100 if you have an average 3-bedroom house. You don't need to. You understand the benefits of it because it switches off automatically based on the temperature of the room it's in. Yeah. So at number 3, it will switch off. But the thermostat only looks at the whole house. This is per room control now, in addition to the thermostat. Okay.
Yeah, so thermostat is effectively an on-off button for your boiler. This is an on-off button for your specific radiator. Yeah. So dryer is a complete no. They're very inefficient. They're very expensive to run, and unless you absolutely need your sort of clothes within a couple of hours, we would never ever recommend using a dryer. From a drying your clothes perspective, and it's generally a rule with radiators, and I think there's this a bit on the last slide. If you cover your radiators, you're trapping the heat, and so if you're looking to yeah. Yeah. So, but I can't see a reason why not.
Okay. What? So I can see how many people here hang clothes at home. Huh? All the heads that are confused with this question. Okay. So the simple answer is, if you put something on the actual radiator, number one, the water can damage the radiator because it's metal, right? Number two, like you said, if you put it, you're trapping the heat. So the heat will go into your clothes, but not necessarily the room, okay? The reality is you need a bit of heat to dry clothes, okay? As a general rule, you'll put it close to the radiator, but try not to cover the whole radiator. Or maybe you put it in a room that's not needed to be heated, but it might dry your clothes, okay? It's a difficult question to answer, because if you leave it outside, it just keeps getting damp, right? Gents, if you're not hanging clothes, there's had sawab, yeah, if you help around the house. There was a question here. I have a dimmer switch at home.
Yeah.
Do I save energy if I dim the light?
Yeah. So again, you've got to have the right light bulbs for that, otherwise they'll pop. But if you've got sort of a dimming light bulb or a dimming LED, and especially with LEDs, it's literally a straight line. The more dim they are, the less energy they use, and it's a straight relationship.
No? Okay. Is it more energy efficient to completely turn off your TVs, your laptops from the plug switch, rather than leaving them on standby, not being used?
So again, there's 3 settings most new sort of TVs and laptops and screens will have. It'll be either on, standby, or sleeping, or off, so 4, not 3. If they're on or on standby, what that means is they'll be using the maximum sort of energy that is available for them. Usually, with most energy efficiency options available for screens, for TVs, for example, they'll go into sort of sleep mode, from standby mode to sleep mode after 4 hours, 4 to 6 hours, depending on the setting that you set. If they're on sleep mode, especially the newer sort of TV screens and computer screens, they will not use a lot of energy, and therefore switching them off from the plug, although will save some energy, we're not talking a very significant amount. The significant amount that you'll save is to turn a TV from on to off, or from standby to off. And so standby effectively is the screen is working normally, but you've just got a black screen at the front. So it's completely on, using as much power as it needs to, but it's just got a black screen. It's ready to sort of stand in again, or sort of pick up whatever you were watching straight away. That's why you've got standby mode. But generally speaking, you don't need to, especially if it's a newer TV or a newer screen, again from the last 5 years or so, you don't need to turn it off from the wall plug or wall socket, as long as it goes into sleeping mode or off.
Okay, so one of the questions was, how is energy consumption calculated? It's a very scientific topic, if you like. I don't want to get into the details, but as general rule, your electric meter will measure in kilowatts per hour. That's kWh that you keep seeing. And those are the industry standard in terms of units that are used to calculate how much you're using, and therefore how much you should be charged. Okay. Gas, I believe, is measured in meters cube.
So gas is cubic feet or cubic meters, and then it is calculated, converted into kilowatt hours, and therefore your rate will be in kilowatt hours. Gas is a bit different because depending on the volume and the density and stuff.
So what I would say is, if you're interested in the maths, if you look at your bill, it actually breaks down what the meter reading is and how it changes that into kilowatt hours, and then how it charges you. So your bill actually has a lot of information about your energy usage, and you need to become familiar with it. If you've been ignoring it for the last 3 years, now is the time to really get to know your accounts. Okay. Okay. Any more questions from the floor? Otherwise, we continue the presentation. Yes, please.
Yeah, so the question was with regards to fridges and freezers, and I think, again, there's a bit on that on the final slide, but generally, fridges and freezers specifically are the one, and your Wi-Fi router, those three sort of pieces of equipment are the one piece of equipment that run 24/7 every day, all year, really, and therefore any savings that you can make, even smaller ones, will have a significant effect because they run 24/7 all day, every day. If your fridge is something like 10 years or older, then it might make sense to look at newer options. But if you are looking at newer options, definitely look at ones that are A-rated or B-rated as a minimum, because they make a significant difference. And if you want what you'll be able to work out what each one uses per annum. So I think an A-rated one would use 325 kilowatt hours or something per year, and then all you'd have to do is work out what your current one uses and work out the difference, and then it'll give you the saving per year, for you to work out whether it makes financial sense or not to make the change. But generally, fridges are 10 years. Their lifespan is 10 to 15 years, and so that's the sort of lifespan or the time that you'll be wasting or not wasting energy.
Correct. So the question was, if you have a plug socket on the wall that has lights, if you leave it on, is it using energy? The answer is yes, because there's a bulb in there that's switching on. So if you switch it off, you'll save a small amount.
It doesn't use energy, no.
There you go. No. So if there's no, the red light that tells you it's on, and the switch is on, will it use energy? The answer is no. No, that's not necessary.
This light.
Okay, there's a red light here, so I don't know if you can see that. So that red light is a small bulb that's consuming energy, but if it isn't there, then by the switch being on, you're not using any energy. Just to add to the fridge question, you have to be careful when you're replacing appliances that you're not doing it for the wrong reasons. Okay, you may inadvertently spend a lot more money replacing them, thinking you're saving energy in the long run, but actually the cost is much more because you're spending so much money on these appliances. Okay, it also depends whether you're going to buy the cheap Argos one or the expensive Miele one, right? But I don't want people to go home from this seminar and suddenly spend £1,000 on equipment, and then I get complaints saying, what are you guys doing? Yeah, my wife is now spending on my credit card. So please, ladies and gents, just be very thoughtful. You know, what we're saying is figure out your numbers. If you know this thing is costing you energy and you can't afford it, then consider whether it's worthwhile replacing it or getting rid of it. Okay? And we'll leave it at that without giving too much DIY advice. Have we got more of the presentation?
A few more slides, yeah. So I'll try and very quickly go through them before. So again, the final slide deals with that specific question. So if I'll just delay the answer to that question till then, if we could just go to the next slide, please. So another source where your energy escapes significantly is your roof. And so this was the state of my roof when I moved into my house a year ago. As you can see, there is some insulation sort of at the bottom, but there's nothing sort of within the roof itself. And so one of the first things that we did sort of as soon as winter last year ended was insulate it effectively. If we could just go to the next slide, please. So this is sort of the outcome. So what we did was put all the insulation that was already there, we covered it with the floor so that we can stand on it, but also what we did here, and I should have put a photo of during, just so that you can see what's beneath here, is we put insulation panels between each of the sticks, if you like, and then sort of put insulating tape and insulating cover in front of them. What this will do is, and again, because heat travels upwards, what this will do is it will minimize the amount of sort of heat that is wasted through your roof, because it will trap the heat inside and therefore the heat won't be able to escape. Just a quick heads up with regards to roof insulation specifically, this is the one bit that needs to be done by a professional, because there has to be a certain amount, according to British standards, between your insulation sheet and the wooden panel next to it, and that's to do with dampness. Otherwise you'll have a roof that will sort of fall down on your head within 15 years, which is not sort of obviously recommended. So that's the one bit of DIY that I cannot recommend anyone does, and definitely get a professional. Again, having said that, it is quite an expensive endeavor, but it's well worth it. Again, we're talking sort of payback within a couple of years maximum. Yeah. So there are grants available, but again, you'd have to sort of speak to your either local council or to your utility provider. A lot of utility providers, Shell, I think, came out on the media yesterday saying they're willing and hoping to help customers with their energy bills through grants and stuff like that. So there are grants out there available, either from your local council or even your utility provider. These guys are making so much money at the moment, they're giving it out for free. And so definitely give them a call, and if you're struggling with your energy bills, and just tell them. And more often than not, sometimes they'll be able to offer some sort of grant or some sort of help. Yeah.
Do you know how much benefit there is in something like this? Because like, I don't have that. I just
Yeah.
have the insulation above you.
Yeah.
When I check it, like sometimes I'll touch the ceiling and it's not full.
Yeah.
Is it definitely going to be something like it's quite expensive?
Yeah, yeah. So it makes a massive difference, and having done this both at my parents' house and now in my house, and the difference that you can feel. So last week it was pretty cold here in London, and how quickly we were able to heat the house and how quickly we were able to turn off our central heating system post the installation of this makes a significant difference. Like, we felt it, and we couldn't work out, it didn't click initially why the house got so warm so quickly and remained warm for a longer period of time. So it does make a difference. Yeah, so if we go to the next slide. So foam insulation, usually you'll get that with sort of your wall insulation. Again, this is not something that you guys can do. You need to get a company in, and I know there are sort of grants from the local council for wall insulation. But I'm not aware of details, and I think each council has a different sort of set of requirements. But definitely give them a call and ask about wall insulation. I think any sort of old age pensioners or anything along those lines should be able to get free wall insulation. But that foam that you were referring to, effectively goes in here and fills the space between your sort of outer wall and inner wall. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Can you go back to the previous slide, please? So, sorry, do you mean here? Yeah, so this is what I should have put a photo in between. So what we've got is we've got that foam insulation, and then we've covered it with this insulation. So there's two sort of types of insulation. I just should have put a photo of the actual foam boards, but on the list that I think we'll put online, it'll have the link to the foam boards that have been used, and this cover as well, the silver one. Yeah, next slide, please. And next one. And so finally, just a couple of more sort of general energy saving tips, if you like. Buy and use a thermos. Again, as I've sort of discussed previously, I've got a bad caffeine habit, and therefore I'm constantly sort of either making tea or making coffee. And one thing that you can do is buy a £20 thermos from your local Sainsbury's or Tesco's or anything along those lines. And what that means is you can boil water in the morning as soon as you wake up, store it there until keep it at 100 odd degrees or between 90 and 100 degrees for a good 10 hours. And that means it'll save you sort of having to boil water constantly. Your washing machines and your dishwashers, only use them when they're full, not when they're half full or on half load. Also, look at lowering the temperature of your washing machine and your dishwasher. However, if you half the temperature but double the time, you're not saving any money. So what you need to work out is what's the least temperature with the least possible time to work out what's the most efficient setting. For some newer appliances, you will have that magic E next to the most efficient settings, and that's the one to go for. But generally, if you're having to wash dishes at 60 degrees for 30 minutes, and then you're having to wash dishes for 60 minutes at 30 degrees, it makes no difference whatsoever. We've halved the temperature, but we've doubled the time. And so there's no difference. There's no efficiency to be made there. If you've got a smart kettle, set the temperature at 80 degrees. So instead of boiling water to 100 degrees that no one can drink if you're able to set the temperature, definitely set it at 80 degrees or something lower. If you're looking to buy new white goods, so everything from kettles to fridges to freezers, dishwashers, washing machines, whatever you want to call them, they'll all have this energy efficiency label on them. And again, if you're looking to change already, definitely go for something as efficient as possible, even if it costs a bit more, or even sometimes maybe significantly more. Because again, especially fridges and freezers, these things run 24/7, 365 days a year for 10, 15 years. So they will make a difference. And whatever savings you can make, although incremental maybe, will play a significant role sort of in the long term. With regards to radiators, I know this is much easier said than done, and I've got this problem in my living room, but try and not block your radiators. If you've stuck something to a radiator, that stops or that traps the heat, and you end up heating your sofa, for example, or your seat, or the clothes that you've got on top of the radiators. So and if there isn't enough space for your sofas, what would be the recommendation is to move your sofa a couple of centimeters ahead of the radiator, just so that the heat has a place to sort of go to effectively. So again, just the IT piece again. If it's on standby, make sure it's off. If it's on sleep mode, it's better to turn it off, but it won't make such a significant difference. But standby is the one that uses a lot of energy. And then on your point there, if your toaster, your microwave, anything along those lines, your oven, if it's more than 10 years old, the technology that surprisingly, the technology that they used for clocks 10 to 15 years ago was very different to the digital ones that we've got in today's appliances. And so therefore, if your oven, your microwave, your toaster is plugged in, and it's got a clock or a timer at the front, that timer is using electricity. For newer ones, it's using very little energy, and therefore it doesn't make a difference. However, for older models, for older ones, that clock uses a lot of energy. It's something like £6 a month, I think it was, just to run a clock. And therefore, if you've got a piece of appliance or a piece of equipment that is more than 10 years or more than 15 years old, they're the ones that I'd be looking to switch off from the wall socket. But anything newer, it should be okay. Next slide, please. And I think, so yeah, so solar panels, and so the reason I did and R about solar panels, but the reason why is that I wanted this to be as DIY friendly and as sort of friendly to the wallet as possible. But solar panels are, especially at today's electricity prices, make a lot of financial sense if you've got the ability to finance them or pay for them. There are a couple of requirements or things that you need to be aware of prior to purchasing them or going down that journey. You need to have a south-facing roof. Anything that's not south-facing, and then you're halving your time that you're able to generate electricity. The other thing is if you've got sort of a slightly older building or potentially a listed building, then it becomes very difficult to get the approvals for solar panels. But if you've got a south-facing roof and your roof is in a relatively good condition, because the other thing, sorry, just to be clear, solar panels have a lifespan of 25 years, and therefore if your roof needs replacing in less than 25 years, it makes more sense to get the roof done first before getting the solar panels, because then you're having to pay for the installation of the solar panels twice. But if your roof is generally in a good condition and will last for the next 25 years, then yeah, and it's south-facing and you've got no issues from neighbours or anything along those lines, then solar panels definitely sort of are making much more sense. They're also relatively cheaper than they were 3 or 4 years ago. But if you are to go down that route, definitely either sort of seek me out, talk to me first, because there are a few sort of things to be aware of when sizing your system. So you don't want to oversize the system, i.e. generate more electricity than you know what to do with, because then that can potentially cause issues with your local utility company, with your local DNO supplier. But you also don't want to undersize them, because then you're sort of losing out on potential. So there's a bit of nuance with solar panels before going down that route. But if it is something that you're interested in, either talk to a professional or just seek someone like me out or anything along those lines. And there's a lot of companies out there that will come and do a free quotation for you. But again, having spoken to a couple of those companies previously, just be aware that they'll send you a salesperson and not an engineer. And so they may not always answer correctly. So just be aware.
Okay, Ayman, thank you. We'll call you about all our solar codes, inshallah. There's quite a few questions I wasn't able to get to. I'll just answer them really quickly where I can. I have a kettle. Should I get an on-demand hot water appliance that's on all day long? So what? And then someone else asks, I have an on all day long hot water appliance. Should I switch to a kettle? So again, you have to look at the cost of changing things versus what you're going to save. You have to look at your usage. If you're in a space where people are making tea every 5-6 minutes like they are at my work, you need something that's on all the time. So the kettle will be more expensive. But if you're making tea twice a day and you're only using the kettle once in a while, then the kettle makes much more sense. So if you have an existing thing, just figure out if it's more expensive to change to something else. Secondly, don't make your decision based on what we are saying. Look up the information online. A lot of this will tell you kettle uses this much power in an hour, whereas this machine uses this much power. You can then figure out roughly what you are spending on that machine. Okay. There were a few political questions about why energy farms are privatized and wind farming in the UK. I think that would take too much time, although it's a very interesting topic. And then somebody asked about battery storage and whether we can store at low rates and pay back at high rates. To Jamil, who posted that question, I'll say it's a big topic. There's a lot to read about it. I'm aware Octopus have tariffs where they will do that for you. But again, to give you an example, a Tesla battery costs about 15 grand. So you have to, really consider whether it's worthwhile putting that in just for that sake. Okay, so just to finish off, this was more an introduction to energy. We hope it will help you understand how your house works and how your bills work. If you have any questions, we can always pass them on to Ayman, or we can answer them ourselves. Although we'll be ending the program shortly, we'll be around for a little while. So if you want to have an informal chat, feel free to approach us. Question? Okay. That's the device I was talking about, where the water is hot all the time. So when you press the button, it comes out. So you have to figure out if that's more expensive for you versus using a kettle. Okay? And if you're opposite, then you have to figure out whether you want to change the other way as well. All right? Please don't go home and spend lots of money all of a sudden. Yeah, I beg you. A lot of you have my number. Feel free to share it. I'm happy to take any questions. I have an interest in this field, and the only reason I have an interest is because I moved into a house that was really cold, so I started looking all this stuff up. I'm very grateful to Ayman for coming along, spending his time. He's been standing here for 2 hours, so thank you very much.
Not at all.
We hope to see you more often, I hope.
Inshallah.
Yeah.
Happy to help.
You said you were married, yeah?
Yeah, you're married. Done. That door is closed.
Just making sure. So this is an interesting device. It's a laser thermometer. So when I point it at the TV, it tells me it's 30 degrees, 31 degrees. So if you're interested, that's cheaper than buying the 900-pound thermal camera.
It's exactly the same one. It's exactly the same one. And
The
it
one,
does
they,
the same job.
the one they use in hospitals for babies to check the temperature. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Last few things just to end. So the Jamaat has a welfare team who can provide financial assistance. So if you are struggling and you don't know where to go, or you need some help, or if you know somebody who's struggling who may not be willing to come forward, but you think we can help them, please feel free to email welfare@hujjat.org, and we will try and connect you to the right people and to provide whatever assistance we can. Jamaat has always been big on welfare and helped where we can, and that has not stopped as COVID and everything has come along. In fact, I think some of that has increased as our generations have moved along. There are a lot of youngsters here, so guys, thank you for coming. I hope you'll teach your elders more about this stuff, especially if you live with them. I did have a list of things to say, so we're going to end with ziyarat, and then there is chai and tabarruk, and then I think Sayyid Sahib would like to sleep at some point. Can I ask any questions just privately? Sure. Yeah, so Uncle is saying there are grants available at your local council, so if you're struggling, feel free to approach them as well. Part of the welfare team will be to guide you towards those types of things that we're aware of. And I believe it's being led by a number of people, with Dr. Sadiq Marali being heavily involved. The email again is welfare@hujjat.org. It's a lot of information today. If you didn't catch any of it, it was too much to digest, I believe it's going to be on YouTube, so feel free to rewatch it and send us questions later if you like. And a humble request that if you found it useful, or if you can think of other programs that would be beneficial to the community, please do let us know. Because if you're not told, sometimes you don't think about it when you're too busy in the day-to-day. So it would be really helpful for your feedback. And with that, I think tawajjuh ziyarah. Please stand. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء، السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين، وعلى 9 المعصومين من ذريتك، علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة بن الحسن، عجل الله فرجه وسهل الله تعالى مخرجه وظهوره، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائي في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا وذليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتيه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.